Welcome to One Mind Brainwaves. I'm Brandon Staglin, your host. Today's topic is guiding our impulses, the neural basis for behavior. I'll tell you a little story about my own experience with that before we get started. So when I was a teenager, I really admired my parents' achievements in their careers and in their work for advocacy for getting things done in society. And I wanted to do something meaningful in my life too as a teenager. And so I decided I would learn self-discipline. And I took what would now be an online course, then it was a course on cassette tape back in the 1980s, and learned a great deal of self-discipline through techniques I was taught from the course. That served me well over my teenage years to learn and grow and ultimately get into some good colleges after high school. But that's when I had a psychotic episode. That's when I developed schizophrenia. And I couldn't help but think afterward that maybe my intense drive and focus that helped me to kind of guide my impulses away from certain immediate desires and needs into more long-term focus toward long-term goals may have put a lot of stress on me and may have contributed to the precipitation of my schizophrenia at the time. But on the flip side, on the plus side, I'm confident that the discipline that I built and the ability to guide impulses that I developed over the years were instrumental in my ultimate persevering and overcoming the symptoms of schizophrenia to be able to recover, be well enough where I am today as president of One Mind. So we're going to talk about guiding our impulses as kind of a double-edged sword, the pros and the cons, and explore that in depth here with two amazing experts and people with experience in the field. We've got Dr. Heather Berlin, a neuroscientist and assistant professor of psychiatry at Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Heather, thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. And also Lindsey Vonn, who is an Olympic gold medalist, world champion ski racer, entrepreneur, and founder of the Lindsey Vonn Foundation. Lindsey, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Later in the show, the science rapper, Baba Brinkman, who also happens to be Heather's husband, will break it all down for us with a performance of Real, Recognize Real from his great album, The Rap Guide to Consciousness. And Baba,
thanks for having me, Brandon. Great to be here.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us. Can't wait to hear your rap. But first, Heather and Lindsey, welcome to Brainwaves. Heather, your research focuses on the study of impulsivity and compulsivity. How does a thought in the brain lead to an impulse? And how does an impulse lead to a behavior? And is it a conscious or an unconscious process?
You know, I think like everything in the brain, it starts out unconsciously, right? Most of what's happening in our brain is happening outside of awareness, and we're only aware of a very little, bit of it. We like to think that we're the master and we're in control of things all the time, but it's not really the case. And so usually an impulse starts from these subcortical parts of the brain, the evolutionarily older parts of the brain, like our reptilian brain. And it's driving us towards something, either driving us towards something that's pleasurable or away from something that's unpleasant. And that's just an immediate urge that eventually kind of bubbles up and rises to our cortex, which is the outer layer of the brain. And we become conscious or aware of it. And then we can make a decision to either act on that impulse or to inhibit, to not act. And that's where a lot of the nuances come in, right? Because we've evolved this prefrontal cortex, the most recently evolved part of our brain, and the humans have the largest percentage of prefrontal cortex compared to the rest of the brain than any other animal. So it's like the brake system that kind of thinks about the future consequences of our actions and determines like whether it would be adaptive or beneficial to allow ourselves to engage in that behavior that the impulse is driving us towards or away or not. And if everything is fully intact in the brain, we can make pretty adaptive decisions. But if there's either underactivation of the prefrontal cortex or there's overactivation of that limbic system that's driving you forward, or the connection between the two is faulty, we can make maladaptive decisions. And then when you throw drugs into the mix, again, that can change the balance a bit. And again, we can act fully on impulse without thinking about the future consequences. And the last part of that is that also our prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until about the age of 25. So that's why children and teenagers, tend to make decisions that might be, based on impulse without thinking of the consequences, because their brain isn't fully formed yet. That brake system hasn't fully kicked in yet. And so that's why we actually hold them less responsible for their actions, like even, legally, because they really don't have the capacity to make as good of a decision as a fully grown, let's say, adult brain that's intact.
Thank you. That's fascinating to get that guided tour of the kind of the brain basis for our behaviors and why we can control them in some cases or not if we're a certain age or under the influence of medications or drugs. I remember when I tried a new medication for my schizophrenia about 10 years ago for the first time, called Abilify. Now I take it the generic word, aripiprazole. I became very reckless, made some rash decisions. I think maybe decreased my prefrontal cortex acuity based on what you just said. So yeah, it's fascinating to hear how that would actually work. But I have another question. It's very interesting to explore this. Is the brain of an elite athlete and others who perform at the very highest levels, is it different in some way from the brains of average people, so to speak? And are they quicker and more dexterous when making decisions? And how does that happen for people?
I definitely think that I am unique in some ways. I don't really have anything in my brain that says, oh, you're going too fast, maybe you should slow down. Like I don't know if that's impulses, like impulse control. I am an adrenaline junkie. I love going fast. I love, having risk. Obviously not crashing, but, there are certain elements to ski racing that I thrive on, that a lot of people are that make a lot of people very nervous. A lot of people get scared. A lot of people, especially after injury, they think more about what they're doing, whereas I don't really think about it. I just go. And so maybe, Heather, you have an answer for me, but I don't know. I know that I am different. And I've always been that way. I don't feel like I really changed that much over the course of my career. I'm 35 now. I retired at 34. And I don't feel like when I got older, I was any more or less cautious. It was kind of always the same. And same goes for after injuries. I was kind of always this way. And I drive recklessly. I feel like I'm in control. I don't know if I really am, but at least that's my perception. Especially in Europe, there's no speed limit. So like I can really have fun with it. I drive fast cars. I love the speed and the rush. So yeah. I maybe I'm missing something. I don't know, Heather.
So yeah, and there are definitely individual differences in terms of how our brains develop and how that affects our our risk-taking capacity, right? So there's two aspects. There's one, just the general developmental, like when you're younger, you tend to take more risks than when you're older. But then the individual difference of there are some people that are just more not only risk takers but risk seeking. They need more. And we did some studies, we call it actually behavioral addiction. So the same neurocircuitry that's involved with drugs of addiction
is involved. That sounds bad.
It's only bad if you end up like killing yourself, but you can know what your predilections are and then create an environment around you that can protect you. So, knowing that you're a type of person that needs a little bit more stimulation to get the same buzz, like I'm not a risk taker, right? So I don't need much to get my adrenaline going. Like if my husband pushes my kid on the swing too high, I'm like, that's enough, right? And that's all I need. Whereas, he needs much more.
Off the swing when I was a kid.
Right. Exactly. And so we actually did research and found that certain people with these with impulsivity or these kinds of behavioral addictions, they actually are a little bit more understimulated. So normally, let's say you tell a person, you're about to win a sum of money, they'll get a little bit of dopamine, that kind of reward chemical in the brain. But people, let's say with pathological gambling problems, they didn't get that same reward. They needed more to get that same level of dopamine that the average person. And so it might be that your brain needs more to get the same feeling that someone else might get by just driving, 75 miles an hour, and you need to drive 100 miles an hour to get that. And so once you know that about yourself, then it's about how to take calculated risks, how to get that that high that you're chasing in a controlled environment where you're not in danger of like harming yourself. But I do think it gives elite athletes an advantage because you're willing to take a little bit more risk than the other guy. You're going to go a little faster. You're going to push, because you got to push the edge between like you're going to fall and hurt yourself and just barely making it. And part of that is overcoming fear. And if you have that edge where you can, overcome fear a little bit more than the next guy, you're going to have that advantage. In addition to all the physical, attributes that you have and all of that, it's that psychological attribute that's very important.
Well, one thing, just as you brought that up, Heather, I don't feel like I have fear. Like, is that the same as, this adrenaline, dopamine addiction that I have? Or is I feel like it's separate, but I've been actually criticized a lot because people were like, there's no way that you're not afraid. And I'm just not, like, it's just not. Maybe there's something wrong with me again, but I don't know. I feel like I've never been afraid of anything.
That's definitely possible. It's slightly different parts of the brain. So the amygdala is the part of the brain, which is a subcortical structure in the brain as well, that has to do with fear. The reward circuitry is in another part of the brain. Well, it's part of the circuit, but the basal ganglia is a part of the brain that's more involved in that kind of reward and dopamine. It receives dopamine. But there are people who have lesions to their amygdala, damage, or maybe it's underactivated, where they feel no fear. And it would be really interesting to do like a brain scan of you, to kind of see what's going on in there.
I do that for sure. I would love to know what's going on inside this thick skull of mine.
But it could be that you have maybe you have smaller amygdalae, maybe they are less active in the sense that you have less fear, which might also mean that you have less anxiety at some level, although anxiety involves other parts of the brain as well, like the prefrontal cortex being overactive. But
I definitely have anxiety, but not, that's more of like a personal insecurity as opposed to like an actual fear.
Right.
I feel like
fear
it's
is in the
very separate.
moment.
Yeah.
They're two different systems. Fear is being in the moment afraid. Anxiety is anticipation about a future event. And that's more cognitive. That's more the cortex I was talking about.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So it's fascinating to hear how this is working in your brain and in your life. Let's talk about one other aspect of the brain and how it works, and that's compulsivity. Lindsey, do you think that a certain degree of compulsivity is helpful to have the kind of singular focus that is needed to really succeed at the highest levels of competition?
I've been always very pretty methodical in everything that I do. I mean, when I ski, I'm almost reckless in, that I have no fear and I'm always pushing the limits, but I'm still very calculated. Like, I know exactly where I'm going. I overanalyze, my surroundings. How do I, have a faster line than other people? I have that kind of sense of, maybe false sense of control, because I overanalyze and I make sure that I know I can control as much as possible. But I've never been like very compulsive in anything. Like, I have no desire to gamble. Like, I don't kind of fit the mold of most, I see former athletes that have, they get into gambling and drinking and things, post career across all sports, because they're not giving that stimulation. They need that compulsiveness that gives them a dopamine hit, but I don't have that at all. So, I don't think I really do anything compulsively besides maybe a like spontaneous vacation, but that's still like 2 weeks planning.
Yeah, no, it's great you have that ability to be aware of your environment really, really closely and intensely. And I think that it must serve you really well in things like driving fast or skiing fast. You need that awareness to go along with the need for speed, the need for the adrenaline to protect you and keep you, doing great in your life. So that's really cool to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Heather, impulses, we can classify them as either good or bad. Is it possible to harness and kind of guide our impulses toward more motivation, performance, and creativity in our lives? And how can we do that?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I wouldn't call the impulses themselves necessarily good or bad, but the behaviors associated with them can be good or bad, right? Those are the things that actually have the consequences. Like anybody can have a thought that pops up in their brain or an urge, right? It's not bad in itself to have the urge, but whether you act on it or not is really the question. And I think that, yes, you can channel those urges in positive ways, right? So like Lindsey was saying, you know, post retirement, she still has those urges to want to like do something exciting. And I don't know what you've channeled them into now, but you know, it's important to get them out. And maybe it's new challenges, you know, maybe it's like, I'm going to hike up that really, you know, big mountain. And they're, again, calculated risks. Like I spoke to, I forget his name. He was in that film Free Solo. You know, he climbed and I spoke to him.
Yeah, he's great. I feel like there's zero fear there.
Zero fear. And I said that to him, and they actually did neuroimaging and found that he had very little activation in the amygdala. That's what I was saying about you, as you might have that too. But he was saying, I said, aren't you afraid? He said, well, no, I mean, there's no risk because I know he's mapped out every exact move. So it's like, within that, he feels safe. To everyone else, it looks crazy. And I imagine, you know, with you too, that it's a calculated risk in that you've done all the preparation and the practice, and then within those, you know, constraints, you're taking risk. But it's not like the average person going down a mountain, you know, very quickly. And so there's some control there. But I think, you know, again, as I'm saying, there are positive ways to get it out. So new challenges, and they could be physical or mental. You know, maybe you decide like, I'm going to, you know, go back to school and study neuroscience.
I'm hosting a TV show.
And what?
I'm hosting a TV show. That's like, I was like struggling. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. You know, it's not that I miss skiing because I was injured so many times. It's like the risk reward didn't align anymore. It didn't make sense, but I still needed something. I needed a challenge. I needed to feel like the rush of, okay, if I mess up, you know, bad things are going to happen. Like I needed that stimulation. And so I got a job hosting a TV show, and that's definitely done the trick. I feel very fulfilled because every day it's very similar to skiing in the sense that, you know, I'm on set, I'm on the spot, I have the camera, so I have the adrenaline, you know, I'm in front of people, I have to perform right now. I have to know my lines. So it's a lot of preparation. It's like a lead up to a singular event that once I'm done, I can then talk to the producers and the showrunners and I can improve. You know, I get that feedback, which is also that positive stimulation that I really love about skiing, and then repeat it, get better every day. And that's, I don't know, it's been very rewarding and a lot less risky.
The only risk is like social embarrassment, which is still a risk, but you know.
But that's what I love. Like need, like, it's not exciting if there's not, you know, something.
A consequence.
Yeah, there's exactly.
That's really cool. You do that TV show. I'd love to hear more about it offline. But you know, when I was recovering from a bad second episode of schizophrenia, I needed a sense of purpose in my life to do something meaningful with my time. And it really helped me to get back into work, to do a cognitive training program, which is something that gave me some meaning and purpose in my life at the time. And then I developed that going back to work again. So that was really helpful for me to have that sense of purpose. And that helped me to channel my sense of discipline and drive into something, you know, worthwhile. Lindsey, you know, I know you talked about before your some mental and physical health challenges like facing and battling depression. But would you say that your tenacity and single-mindedness and the mental grit required for success in sports and so forth has served you very well in overcoming your fears?
Yeah, I mean, I think skiing was a way of therapy for me, you know. I think I would have had a really hard time had I not had skiing, because it always was like a carrot dangling in front of me. You know, it's something that I loved to do and I was passionate about it. And whenever I had a hard time, you know, and I was depressed, I would be able to go skiing and kind of use that as my emotional release. You know, no matter what the situation was, I could always be on the mountain and feel really happy. And when I don't have that now, like the first 6 months after retirement, I was really depressed because before I started doing that show, I really struggled. So the question then is, what happens when the show is over? I don't know how long it'll keep going, but I think that's something that I'll definitely have to keep working on with my psychiatrist.
Okay. Well, onward and upward. There's always new challenges to take on. I firmly believe in that. You've got to always keep on seeking out new things to explore, discover, and grow with. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
It's something great after what you're doing now, which is great in and of itself. Yeah. Thanks for.
I was just going to say that I think, part of what is therapeutic, and I'm looking into this for treatment as well, is like getting into these flow states, and that's probably what happens when you get on the mountain and you're skiing, where you're fully in the moment. Like you don't have a choice but to think about other things, and you're kind of turning down that prefrontal cortex. That's the part that has to do with the rumination and the negative thoughts and that are automatic. But when you can get into a flow state where it's like you're in the immediate moment, you don't have time to think about all those things, it can kind of shut off that part of the brain. And it's really associated with very positive emotions. Like you want to get into that flow state where there's no time to think because there's pressure and there's consequences, and you just shut it down and you're fully present. And I think, it can be skiing, it can be a TV show. And when the TV show ends, it'll be something else that you got to find the flow state that kind of shuts off that inner critic and the negative thoughts. And I think that's very therapeutic for depression, for anxiety, for all sorts of mental health conditions.
Yeah.
I think working out has definitely been something else that's like, it's a similar type of feeling and maybe the same flow state, where you have to be very present. I love working hard to the point where like, I can't think about anything else but the work that I'm doing right then, so I can definitely see that. I understand exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what about work we do to help others? So you founded this great foundation, the Lindsey Vonn Foundation, and that your mission in that foundation is to help a new generation of young women to grow and thrive in their lives, whatever their passions may be. Can you tell us a little bit about your work with the Lindsey Vonn Foundation, please?
Yeah, so the reason kind of why I was so driven in skiing, obviously I wanted to be a champion, but I also met a champion, Peekaboo Street, and seeing her was something that was really tangible for me. I instead of seeing skiing on TV, I saw a person in real life, and for that minute and a half, she inspired me for the rest of my career. And so what I wanted to do with the foundation, with that premise in mind, is that I want to help kids realize their dreams. And sometimes they don't believe in themselves, or that they don't believe it's possible, or it's unattainable. They're not confident, whatever it is. They don't have enough money financially. I want to help them achieve that. And I think one thing for me that was always important is that, a lot of people make foundations just to say that they have a foundation. They don't really do anything directly with it. And so my foundation, I do all the camps with the kids. I want to be what Peekaboo was for me. I want to encourage them and give them confidence and teach them skills about how to overcome negative thoughts, how to create positive thoughts. If a coach tells you that, you did something wrong, how to not get down on yourself and actually turn that around and find a way to get better. There's a lot of these things that, like, mental tricks that no one really teaches kids. I think that's one reason why sports, I think, are really important in the mental maturity of growing into adult, is that you learn those consequences and how to be better. And granted, a lot of kids quit sports, but I think it still teaches them the reward of working hard, the reward of positive thought, how to use criticism in a positive way. And so we have these Strong Girls camps where we bring the kids in for the weekend, and we have a curriculum, and we combined, the studies with sports and activities to build a kind of camaraderie, teamwork within the group, because no one really knows each other. Some people do, but most people don't know each other. So we try to help them learn how to build good friendships, and there's just a lot that we are able to achieve in a small period of time, which has been very rewarding. And we also have a scholarship, but, just trying to find areas in which women are underrepresented and, helping them, give them the tools and the finances and, the encouragement to follow their dreams.
That is fantastic. You do this work directly with the kids. I mean, you're so involved in it. It must be very rewarding to see them, grow and succeed with your work that you do with them. And all the techniques that you're talking about are really interesting to me, because we at One Mind are working on ways to help people kind of in preventive ways, kind of similar to what you're doing, to avoid developing mental illnesses. And so if you can foster resilience and a sense of purpose early in life, and skills to manage disappointment and so forth. I'm just really excited to hear about your foundation. Thanks for doing that work.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
You bet.
And Dr. Berlin was on, we do a little career day YouTube series, which has been really fun to do. Because of COVID, I wanted the kids to be able to stay focused and positive and looking towards their future and not get so, bogged down with everything that's happening. And so Dr. Berlin was kind enough to come on the show and talk to one of my scholarship recipients. And, I try to pair our scholars and what, they're trying to achieve with other very successful people in their profession. And they get to talk back and forth. I get to talk with the participant, with Dr. Berlin. And I think it's a really positive experience. And I've gotten great feedback from the kids. It's not like a popular thing, but I do it for the kids. I think they benefit a lot from it. And I want to keep going with it even past this whole situation. But Dr. Berlin was one of my best episodes. So.
Oh, thank you. I fully enjoyed it. And thank you for having me on, by the way, as well. And, I wanted to thank both of you guys for just all the work that you're doing, to help people, but also to break down the stigma of mental health issues, to come out like Lindsey, it's brave of you as a public figure to come out and say, like, I've, dealt with depression and this is how I deal with it. And, there needs to be more people like that who are high profile, who come out and say, like, you don't have to be embarrassed of this. This is nothing. Like, it's a part of your body, like any other part of your body. And there can be problems just like you break an ankle, and we should break down this stigma about it. And so I think the work that both you're doing in different ways is helpful in that. Not to mention the work, Lindsey, you're doing with, helping young women. And I'm very passionate about helping young women in STEM, getting into the sciences, and helping promote that, and trying to, create role models for young girls to go into this direction. But so I just wanted to thank you both for, everything that you're doing, which is amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. Yeah, thank you so much, Lindsey, and you too, Heather, for the work you do. So Heather, to touch on what Lindsey mentioned a moment ago, briefly, we're currently living through a great crisis. What gives you hope when you look at neuroscience for the development of ways to help people with living through these challenging times?
It is a very hard time, especially people who had pre-existing mental health issues, for the isolation, the uncertainty, we don't know when it's going to be over, parents having their children home, trying to work at the same time. There's so many stressors. So if you've already had either an illness coming into this, or you had a predisposition towards an illness, and usually a stressor is the thing that can precipitate it. There are a lot of people dealing with mental health issues. One important thing, just not in the realm of neuroscience, but in the realm of psychology, is that they've now broken down the barriers. So we can now do teletherapy, which means that more people can have access to mental health care, which I think is so important, for people who are isolated. You don't have to leave your home. You can get help. In terms of neuroscience, it's a little bit longer of a timeline, but we're working on lots of things that, the most novel and exciting development is actually the use of psychedelic drugs for psychotherapy, which has been really interesting. Yeah, and a breakthrough. I mean, people who've been treatment resistant, whereas they tried the mainstream drugs and they just don't work. So for treatment-resistant depression, we have ketamine that's been really helpful for some people, especially with suicidality. It can really knock that out in someone's in crisis. You have mushrooms or psilocybin, right, for anxiety. People with PTSD, they're using MDMA or ecstasy. And it's, in a controlled environment. You're not saying just go out and recreationally use it, but with the guidance of a therapist, psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is, I think it's the next like sort of wave of where psychiatry is going. And I think, and outside of the medication, you know, this idea of helping people get into these flow states where they lose their sense of self and time and place, which can be very therapeutic. You can get there with the psychedelics, but you can also get there with meditation, mindfulness, you know, engaging in these activities where you find your flow state, I think also can be very therapeutic. And ultimately, like further down the line, we're looking at things like neural prosthetics. We have these neural implants that, again, for people who are treatment resistant depression, treatment resistant obsessive compulsive disorder, they can actually implant electrodes in certain circuits in your brain that's connected to a stimulator, like what was used for pacemakers. And it's really helping people where nothing else has worked and they're very severe. So there's a lot of these technologies that are in development now. I think they're going to ultimately become less invasive, where you don't actually have to do neurosurgery to have the effects of these sort of neural pacemakers, let's call them. So there's a lot of exciting things in development right now.
That's so cool. And it's great to hear all these hopeful developments that are coming down the line. Lindsey, building on what Heather has said in terms of hope, what words of encouragement do you have for anyone who's struggling to overcome obstacles here in this time of COVID-19?
I recommend pets. Like my dogs they've been my saving grace. You know, I've had a lot of ups and downs in my career, especially, you know, with my injuries. Whenever I got injured, the second time I blew my knee out, I got my first dog from an animal shelter, and Leo was hit by a car. He has, you know, pins in his knee. So we're like two peas in a pod. But, you know, whenever I have a hard time, he's always there, lays his head on my lap, and instantly makes me feel better. You know, I think less and am less anxious about the future, and I just kind of relax, and I'm more in the moment. And I eventually got more because I had more and more problems. So I have 3 dogs. Lucy travels with me because I was like, this is great. I love having my 2 dogs at home, but I don't have anyone on the road with me, you know, because I'm traveling every week, sometimes multiple times a week, in different hotel rooms by myself. You know, you get home from a day on the hill, and whether you win or lose, you're still coming home to an empty hotel room. So that's been like one of my most difficult issues with being on the road. And so Lucy has helped me tremendously. But I think right now in COVID, like there's so many people who are alone in apartment buildings, and, you know, they're now looking at pets. Animal shelters are clearing out because everyone's adopting them, which is amazing. And I hope that people don't, you know, all of a sudden when things get back to normal, you know, give them back to the shelter. But I think it definitely provides a sense of warmth and stability, even though everything is so uncertain. And yes, it's a lot of maintenance, but it's also like you have something that needs you, you know, and that's also a sense of like, it's a very positive thing in my opinion. So animals.
Yeah, totally. I'm totally with you. I have a rabbit and a dog, and they get you up in the morning early to take care of them, and they give you unconditional love. They'll always do that no matter what. And I feel like I'm, you know, the best life I can give them as well. And thanks for saying pets, because I'm with you on that. Thanks so much, Lindsey and Heather, for your insights, your wisdom today. Really appreciate you being on the show and sharing all that with us. Viewers, if you have any questions for Lindsey or Heather, I hope you were able to ask them during the webcast premiere, but you're welcome to follow up with questions on onemind.org/brainwaves over the next few days. So thank you, Lindsey and Heather, for being on the show. Now,
thank you for having us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Great to have you. There may be no better examples of impulse-driven action than the genre of music known as rap and hip-hop. And Baba Brinkman, the science rapper, is here to show us why. He's known as the science rapper for his combinations of beat, poetry, and brain science. He's also an award-winning playwright, and he's Heather Berlin's husband, so he has an inside track on the psychology behind it all. Bob, it's so great to have you with us.
It's a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed listening to this conversation as well. It delved into so many niches and crevices of the brain. Great, and let's see some of the niches and crevices of the brain that you're going to tell us about too.
First, tell us about how you became a rap artist. Is it a natural aptitude, or is it something you can develop and practice over time and get better at?
Well, I would have to have an identical twin separated at birth to know 100% for sure. I feel like I worked really hard at it and wasn't very good when I started. But of course, there's aptitude, and then there's determination and passion, and maybe that is a natural endemic thing. I don't know. I was sort of obsessively focused on poetry as a teenager. It was the literature classes that were my favorite in school, and at a certain point, I was like, William Blake, Geoffrey Chaucer, John Donne, Notorious B.I.G., Eminem, Tupac, Jay-Z. What's the difference? They're all doing the same thing, rhyme storytellers. So that became the thesis concept that I wrote about for my English masters. And at the same time, I started penning some hyper-literate rap songs based on what I was studying and my interests. And that kind of evolved into from literature rap to science rap.
Wow, what a story. What a story. And your art itself, the way you compose music and your raps kind of gave some insight on where the content, ideas for the content came from previously, but now as composing a new piece of rap, do you find that it's more of a continuous process that takes time to develop, or is there freestyle improv? Is that more kind of the core of it?
Well, when it's really working, it just comes, and you're like, where did that come from? Divine inspiration has struck. But you can't always plan as if it's going to be brilliant right away. So there is a real grinding, wordsmithing, chiseling side as well, where you spend hours and hours agonizing over a few arrangements of phrases, and it's both. It's just when it flows, you're like, why isn't it always flowing like this? But if you expect it to always flow and let that get you frustrated, then you won't explore the potential that's there.
Fascinating. And we had a rapper on the show a couple of episodes ago named Luna, and he talked about how he'd get these amazing insights from his experiences, and then those would give him the content that he'd use as kind of the inspiration for molding into something, with the work to put into it. Kind of sounds like what you do there, as you described. Well, that's fascinating to hear how you do it. But even more fascinating and exciting will be to hear the actual performance. Real, recognized, real. A rap is worth 1,000 words, so to speak. Can we hear your performance, please? A real, recognized, real.
Absolutely. So this is the opening track that I would usually start my Rap Guide to Consciousness show with. And it is reflecting on where do our thoughts and our creative impulses and our consciousness reside in the brain, and as an artist sort of doing it in real time, what does it feel like and what does it look like? And part of this rap is going to be sort of freestyle, composed on the fly as I was listening to what the conversation, how it unfolded. I was taking notes in the background. So there's some written and some improv elements, but it's all brand new. This is not a rap I could agonize over for weeks, minutes instead. All right, so let's we'll throw in this video in the background so you can see my little real-time synchronized design. Let's try this out. That work? Oh yeah.
Real, recognize real. Yes, we have a soul, but it's made of lots of tiny robots. Real, recognize real. Real, recognize real. Not a single one of the cells that compose you knows who you are or cares.
I'm coming at you I'm trying to find a mind that's awake. Real, recognize real, like the rappers say. I can see you have it too, so namaste. So let's activate, come on. I'm coming at you from a brain in the vat, a brain trapped in the skull of someone saying a rap you couldn't see from my perspective if your brain was attached to my optic nerve. Cause if your brain was intact, it wouldn't work. You just end up bringing your mind along. So a better way to connect is via this dialogue. I have a thought, I find a beat to recite it on, and if it lands, you have a similar kind of thought. I'm igniting a spark in dark places. The fact that we could even share thoughts is amazing. What's a thought made of? if not information that's contagious. I guess I caught the plague from Black Thought, De La Soul, A Tribe Called Quest. They infected me with the memes to rhyme complex, conscious hip-hop. What a fine concept, but I'm trying to discover how I'm conscious, how I can say a line with the line on deck, memorize rhymes and improvise content. How could I invent? Practice makes perfect? Okay, but what's popping up in the brain circuits? I'm trying to find a mind that's awake, real, recognize real, like the rappers say. I can see you have it too, so namaste. Okay, brain cells activate. Sometimes I'm divided, sometimes I'm of one mind. My mind becomes rhyme. I disappear into these lines, just a rapper that's known for slang and brag and impulse control and discipline, just like Brandon Staglin with the schizophrenic episodes he had to endure. But was his early discipline training the cause or the cure? Just train till the demons are gone. Bring it on like a speed demon on a peak of a mountain. Lindsey Vonn below is a downhill slope, baby, and I'm gonna rip it up. Heather Berlin's like, girl, you got a shrunken amygdala. There's nothing in Lindsey's brain that says you gotta stop. Not even going 200 miles an hour on the Autobahn. Heather's a bit different. She's got the brain figured, but if I push the kids too high on the swings, she gets triggered. It's a behavioral addiction, not a buzz with the rap beats. I'm trying to push my babies to become elite athletes. Rewire the circuits. We got the brain of a monkey. That's why Lindsey calls herself an adrenaline junkie. It's heroin to zero in on a hill and just barrel in without embarrassment to win the gold like a heroine. But wait, what's a brain? A brain's a pattern finder. How much design work can you find in a rhyme verse? To make a rhyme, first you need a rhymer, an organism with no intelligent designer. From Aristotle to Thomas Aquinas, people thought if you want to design, you need a mind first, but it's kind of the reverse, because your mind is a product of a mindless process that builds it from the bottom up. Physical stuff, pushing physical stuff, a perspective from a quintessence of dust. It was a blind watchmaker that perfected us. It took 1 billion years to make a brain and connect it up with this 80 billion neurons in a network, each with 7,000 synaptic connectors, a minimum of 50 trillion intersections. Such a pretty materialistic picture of a mind that's awake. So when I say real, recognize, y'all shout back real, okay? Real, recognize, real, real, recognize, real. Can you feel those brain cells activate? You gotta be quick. I'm trying to find a mind that's awake. Real, recognize real, like the rappers say. You people have it too, so namaste. Okay, brain cells, activate.
I feel so activated now. Namaste. Thank you for that delightful performance. That
was great.
Yeah, totally firing on all cylinders, my brain. Thank you so much, Baba.
Yeah, it's a good rapid prototyping exercise to try to create a rap that works real quick like that. But speaking of adrenaline junkies, that's where I get my hit from. You sign up for the gig, you put yourself in impossible situations, you feel the adrenaline like, how am I going to pull this off? And then when you actually do it, something just flows and you feel like a real buzz afterwards. So the more I've done that, the more I've tried more and more challenging situations. I put myself on the spot,
Congratulations. Total epic success. Love what you did on the spot. I'm so glad we recorded that too, so I can hear it again. Thank you so much, Baba. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Well, yeah. So viewers, thank you too for all your participation. Remember, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to log on to onemind.org/brainwaves and post them there. Thanks everybody for being part of such an amazing webcast, and have a great day.
You're feeling anxious, afraid, alone.
I haven't been able to see my family or my friends.
Families that struggled to find mental health care before find it even harder now.
I feel a lot of guilt in not being with my family.
Are there solutions? Visit onemind.org, seeking the answers, bringing help to the front lines, accelerating brain health for all. Help us fund new treatments at onemind.org.